Hi there, my name's Rob, and in this session we'll be talking about how we captivate our learners for learning using educational escape rooms. Now this could apply to all levels of learning, right from lower primary school right through to tertiary, which is where I primarily use escape rooms within my classes. So let's talk about the problem first that we're trying to solve. Well, there's multiple of them, but one of the problems we're trying to solve specifically is around student engagement. We want students to be engaged in class because if they're engaged in class, they actually want to learn and want to know things and want to understand things and wrestle with things and work them out. Now, there's some things we don't have control over. Maybe what's going on in their home life, or maybe the time of day of the class if it's just after lunch or something like that. Or maybe what's going on out the window, or what's going on in the classroom next door to you. But there are some things that you can have control over. Things like how we present our material and how we engage our students with that material, how we get them to work together to solve some of that material. A whole bunch of different things there that we have control over. Now you've probably come across this cone of learning idea, and I wouldn't get too hung up on the specific percentages about how much you learn with these different particular areas. But something that we know kind of intuitively is that if we happen to just read something or hear something, we're less likely to be able to remember it and recall it in detail weeks down the line or even years down the line, compared to if we actually have to do something and use a whole lot of knowledge and implement something and maybe learn some of those lessons the hard way. And so this idea of using educational escape rooms, we're hitting that lower area of the pyramid where we're actually implementing something. We're doing a simulation, we're doing real things and solving real problems in a context and having to explain it to others. As we do so, the learning we're doing is at those levels where the learning is deeper and more integrated and hopefully sticks a whole lot better. Well, why actually do educational escape rooms? Well, firstly, we want to engage students strongly. So they're there and their focus and their attention is on the learning that they need to do. Focusing in this sort of way where the educational escape rooms provide helps them block out all those distractions and things that are going on around them. Secondly, we want to improve their intrinsic motivation so that they actually want to learn and they want to complete the activity. It's a whole lot easier to teach someone that wants to learn than someone that's kind of only half interested and, well, they're there because they need to be there, but they actually don't want to retain all that much. If we can help them want to learn, that's half the barrier to some of this learning. And finally, we want to really improve their collaborative problem solving, where they're explaining things to others and teaching each other and working together and dividing work between them and helping each other out, because they do so as they're going through those steps of explaining things and, oh, you do this part and this is how this works. They're actually reinforcing that learning and having to verbalize that learning, communicate that learning to each other. So what are escape rooms? Well, traditionally there's been recreational escape rooms. Now, recreational escape rooms are the just for fun escape rooms where you're effectively locked in a room, but not normally locked due to fire codes and things like that. And you need to solve a whole bunch of puzzles as a team to try and escape from that room. Now, these are just for fun activities. There's no intended learning outcomes or anything associated with them, and they're really a recreational entertainment sort of activity. Now, with educational escape rooms, well, first and foremost, they're for learning. We want to have some educational outcomes, some learning outcomes as part of that, so students actually learn something besides learning collaborative teamwork and problem solving and things like that. Now, due to scalability constraints, often these educational escape rooms aren't in a big room that's been purpose designed and built for that, because that doesn't scale very well to most classrooms. We don't have hundreds of small rooms that we can leave set up with as an asylum or as a bank vault or something like that in perpetuity. So what we do is we create tabletop escape rooms where we have a tabletop escape room decoder box and we have some envelopes and things like that that allow us to do that at a large scale, 50, hundreds of students at a time, and that allows us to cater for the standard classrooms that we're actually using. All we need is some tables, some chairs, some pens and pencils and things, and our actual puzzles and decoder boxes. Now, typically when I'm talking about escape rooms, I'm saying that we need 3 essential ingredients within that escape room. Now, one of them is our storyline or theme. And a storyline or theme is one thing that kind of separates these escape rooms from just being, well, here's a bunch of puzzles that you need to solve. Solve the puzzles as a tutorial or a problem-solving class or something like that. And turning it into a game, something that increases that intrinsic motivation and increases that attention span so that we're actually focusing on solving something collaboratively together. And so there's a whole bunch of different themes that you could use, and we'll cover some of those later on. The next thing is the puzzles, because escape rooms are all about puzzle solving and unlocking some sort of a mystery or solving some sort of a challenge. And so our puzzles are connected to the learning that we're doing. So they might be puzzles on something to do with a periodic table, for example, or something to do with programming, or something to do with an ancient historical event, and unlocking some clues and riddles and ciphers and things associated with that. We also have some way, or we need some way of validating puzzles. Have we got the right answer or the wrong answer? Now, traditionally, we've used things like padlocks or combination locks and things like that. But we'll talk later on about the escape room decoder box, and that decoder box allows us to actually test whether the students' answers are correct or not correct and provide some basic feedback to them on them. Let's talk about setting the theme. We want our themes to be immersive and draw the students into them. Now, there's a number of different ways we can present our themes, and there's a bunch of different theme ideas that I'll show you in a moment. Some ones that we've done have been like a Cold War bunker where the doors close and oxygen's running out and things like that. What we're trying to communicate in these sort of themes is some urgency to solve these puzzles and some sort of a reason and context for solving these puzzles. And often our puzzles will integrate in with this theme in some way, shape or form. That helps our cohesion throughout the activity. Often we try and make these storylines progressive so that as you progress through the puzzles, you get a bit more of the theme or some extra information and maybe a bit of an encouragement along the way. There's a bunch of different ways you can actually implement these themes. Everything from written ones, which are probably the easiest to implement because all you need is a printer and some writing, through to video themes. You could even do like augmented reality or virtual reality themes with a headset. So there's all sorts of different ways you could implement these themes and all sorts of different themes. You might want to include an industry element to what you're doing. And so there might be elements of like an audit or looking for some sort of a sabotage or something like this. Or it could be set in like a industrial chemical plant or something like that, which may give the students a bit more exposure to their real world working environment where they're expected to work. And hopefully not with what's gone wrong, the saboteur or whatever it may be. That's part of the storyline that gives a reason for actually solving these particular puzzles. I'll put up a couple of sample themes, but one thing that we want to do is with these sample themes, particularly if they're in a written form, is actually read them to the students with a bit of expression and put that expression into it at the start so everyone gets the same sort of introduction to the activity and experience in the activity and sets them off going on the right direction. So you don't read them monotonically of the year is 2065. That's not going to encourage or enthuse anyone to the activity. So read it with some expression, or if you're creating videos, have some expression and some graphics in those videos that make it a bit more exciting and something that you want to read. So I'll give you three sample ones. We've got this space themed one here, which we use. We've got one that's based at Wayne Enterprises, so there's some superhero elements to here and defeating some villain that's causing all sorts of a ruckus. And here's another one. This one is a more ancient one, bit of an Indiana Jones theme to it, where you have to solve a series of puzzles and reach the legendary gold that's been talked about here. So let's think about the general types of escape room themes or storylines. And these ones I've borrowed from others that have written on them. Things like escape the thing, so there's some sort of an imprisonment associated with it. That's typically the classic escape room idea of you need to escape from this room or this jail cell or something like that. There's a disaster sort of one, so fix the thing before whatever disaster is going to occur. I've done one where there's a water treatment plant that was malfunctioning and was going to spew sewage into the environment within a certain amount of time if it wasn't repaired in time. There's a heist one, so you might need to steal some secret documents or some jewels or something like that. Classic escape room theme. You've got your investigation style theme, putting on your Sherlock Holmes hat for a moment and working out why this is the way it is, or some sort of a quest that you could follow that quest and solve various puzzles within that quest to complete and gain whatever knowledge you need or equipment you need or whatever it may be. Or it might be some sort of a test as well, that you need to complete these things, and it might be part of a job interview, or you might be on some sort of an internship at some company that you've stumbled into this area and it's an impromptu test that you didn't realize, and you've come behind the scenes and you need to complete something before you get fired. I don't know what it is. All sorts of different possibilities you could have there. But one thing to consider when you're trying to integrate your themes with your puzzles is ask yourself the question, and this is directly from Scott Nicholson, who was in this space beforehand and why did they lock things up, or why are the puzzles set up the way they are? And that will help you make those puzzles cohesive within the particular themes and storylines and things you've got. It helps them not just stick out like sore thumbs, like a bunch of completely unrelated puzzles that don't relate to the theme at all or don't relate to each other at all. It helps provide some structure and some cohesiveness to it. Well, next we have the puzzles themselves. And typically the way I present the puzzles is in a series of sealed envelopes. Typically I do 3 rounds of puzzles, so envelope 1, 2 and 3. And that makes it easy to transport them around and multiply them around as well if we're scaling up or down our class, for example. Now, those puzzles need to have one correct answer. Multiple correct answers just doesn't compute very well, particularly for validation, and so students will need enough information there to work out which is the correct answer, which isn't the correct answer, and move on with that. They also need to be a numerical answer, just because the way our decoder boxes work result in numbers, and they need to work out not just what the numbers are, but what the order of the numbers is that you're actually inputting into the box. Otherwise, they're just guessing random numbers. There's a website there, the Decode website. It's nothing to do with me, but I found it online, and they've got dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of different ciphers and puzzle encoding ideas that could be really helpful as you're designing your own puzzles. I know I've used it in the past. And then we have some way of validating our puzzle answers, and what I use is this. It's actually something I invented. We call it an escape room decoder box. And the idea is that you can put your puzzle answers in there, you punch them in on a little keypad, and it'll tell you if you're right or wrong. It'll also keep the time for you, so it'll tell you how much time you've got remaining. It can provide penalties, so if you've guessed the wrong number, it'll deduct a minute from your time. You can turn that on or off. And it can also give you clues. So we can turn it on so that every 5 minutes it'll give you a clue and help you along the way and keep you moving forward rather than getting stuck and frustrated and not knowing where to go next. Finally, it's got a whole bunch of built-in data analytics. So if you're publishing, like I am in this area, you can download all the data analytics of how long each of the groups took to complete each puzzle in seconds and how many incorrect guesses they've made for each puzzle. And that'll help you work out your various difficulty of puzzles, which ones are easier, which ones could be tweaked and improved upon. So set up really easy for this decoder box. Basically, there's some software that's provided. You set the answers for puzzle 1, 2 and 3. You tick whether you want clues delivered or not and penalties delivered or not. And you choose how much time the escape room is going to occupy. Typically, I use about 45 to 50 minutes for a normal classroom. But for a student engagement activity where I've got some high schoolers, I might be aiming for something more like 25 to 30 minutes. And that lets me give a chance to talk about engineering or something like that as well. Now, often I get the question, well, isn't there an app to do this sort of thing? Can't you just do it online or on a computer or something like that? And we've experimented with various apps around as well. And the feedback we've got from students is we're really glad it's not an app. On paper, together with this decoder box, it's a whole lot more real and a whole lot less abstract and kind of sells the story a whole lot better. We've done them online using Zoom and things like that as a technology to mediate things, and I've designed a purpose-built website for it. What we've found is students take a lot longer. They get a lot more stuck, a lot more frustrated, a lot less communications going on compared to when they're sitting right next to each other and working together to solve these particular puzzles. Having said that, there are a bunch of different online interfaces around, and sometimes you might be in different countries or different states or geographically separated, or there might be a pandemic going on, and so you need to fall back on something like this. And so there's a couple of different examples there that you could use. What I thought now I'd do is go through some different puzzle samples for you and give you a bit of a picture of the different sort of puzzles that you could do. Some of these I've collaborated with various people on, and some of these I've actually designed for my own subjects as well. So we've got one here behind which is all around biochemistry and looking at different concentrations of various reagents that we require. And students will actually solve each of these and work out what those different concentrations are and the amount they need for each of these. So a bit of mathematical modelling that we need here. And we've got another one also requiring mathematical modelling, where we've got a whole lot of antennas with transmitters and receivers, each with different powers and different frequencies they're operating over. And we need to use the free space path loss formulas to work out what sort of signals we're getting between our different locations. So there's mathematics and some geography there, working out distances between things, and some following equations as well. We've got some other mathematical ones, like matching different shaped objects to different waveforms of water flowing in and flowing out, giving a specific mathematical calculation that we have on water inflow and water outflow from each of these different tanks. It could be some physical reasoning puzzles where we've got a whole bunch of gears here and students need to work out the direction that each of those gears are turning in. So we actually normally 3D print a bunch of gears and give those to the students so they can work them out, and maybe a rubber band as well, because some of these gears could be belt driven and some of them could be directly coupled with each other. And so when we couple them with each other, they reverse the direction of spinning. When they're belt driven, they maintain the same direction of spinning. We've done a whole bunch on different electronic circuits, which involve some basic node voltage analysis and looking at some Ohm's law calculations, looking at resistors in series and parallel, tracing through circuits, all of these sort of things make some of this circuit analysis come alive a bit and be a bit more fun than just, well, analyze these circuits because you must. Now, most of the puzzles I've shown you thus far have been paper-based puzzles, but we've created a few that are not paper-based puzzles, but these ones actually use circuit boards with a little microcontroller inside them. Now, these are designed to test students' knowledge and help them understand how to use their oscilloscope and how to use their multimeter. So they're measuring different peak-to-peak voltages and different periods of waveforms and propagation delay and phase shifts between different waveforms. They're measuring things like voltages and continuity and resistance between different pads and things like that. So they're getting a really good first-hand view of actually using these instruments and applying these instruments. Sometimes we're using obfuscation, so we're hiding things within puzzles, maybe using some mirror writing or some back-to-front writing or something like that. And sometimes we're hiding things within a scene. For example, we might have a scene here where we've got a whole lot of occupational health and safety issues, tripping hazards and ladders and all sorts of things that we could hide within a scene, flammable goods maybe. Or we might be hiding things within some code where we've got mistakes within that code, and that helps students debug code and work out what's wrong with their code and hopefully over time actually debug their own code. I've been teaching programming for over 16 years, and so a number of these programming mistakes that are really common that we put in these, and the students can start identifying them for themselves rather than actually having someone point them out for them all the time. So that's really helpful. There's a whole bunch of different ciphers you could use, like Pigpen ciphers or Caesar ciphers, Mexican Army ciphers, or you could use different forms of modulation like this one above. This is straight over serial port, and students reverse engineering the code based on understanding how that modulation actually works. Some puzzles we use are classification-based puzzles, and so I've done a bunch of cybersecurity puzzles where they're classifying between, oh, is this a phishing email or not a phishing email? Is this a phishing SMS or is this not a phishing SMS? And they're working out social engineering and things like that by looking at the real thing versus a fake and understanding the difference between those. We've done some geography-based puzzles and thinking about things like spatial reasoning, looking at the distance between different objects. And for example, this particular puzzle that we use with some of our international students helps students understand where things are in Australia and how big our country actually is. And then we sometimes combine some of those things together. And here's an example of a puzzle where we have part of the storyline combined in there. We're using different sensors, and students might need to do some mathematical modeling and then use some reasoning along with that mathematical modeling along with a bit of a cipher, so there's multiple steps here. Now students may decide to get some students to work on part of it and some students to work on another part and come together, but they're all combining their knowledge and reasoning and understanding to try and work out what's going on here. And here's another one down the same sort of lines where they're using some sensors. This is in one of my sensors subjects. They're using some sensors, thinking about how that sensor works in a physics sort of sense and making some calculations based on that. So I like to have a bit of a checklist that I think through around when we actually create puzzles. And the first question I always ask is this puzzle too cryptic or too difficult? The very first escape rooms we created were in a subject I've been teaching for about 10 years. And the puzzles that were created, I had a colleague create them for me. I spent 2 hours and I couldn't solve a single one of his puzzles. They were just way too cryptic. And they were using knowledge that was in his head, but not in my head. And so we want to think, okay, what are people thinking about? What can they solve without actually basically giving them all the clues to actually solve that particular one? And that's why it's important to do plenty of play testing with these sort of things. Also, is there only one correct solution, or are there multiple correct solutions that, well, that becomes really hard to validate, because it could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this. It's not really fair. Then you're thinking, well, does it blend well with the theme that we're trying to create? Or does it actually bear no relation to the theme? In which case, you've just got a theme that you read and a series of isolated puzzles that have nothing to do with it. Then you can ask questions like, well, will it break easily, or is it a bit more robust like those circuit boards that I was telling about before? And is it boring? Well, we don't want our puzzles just to go on and on and on and be boring, but we want them to be engaging, because that's one of the fundamental things that we were talking about at the start. We want to engage our students and get them to want to learn and solve these particular puzzles. Then we have a bit of a checklist for how we actually run these escape rooms in the classroom. Firstly, I always bring spares of things, because despite my best effort, sometimes I drop a piece of paper from one of the puzzles underneath my desk and it's never seen again, and it's just a big mystery. And so I always bring a spare just in case, so I can quickly pop it out and give it to students to make sure they've got all the things they need to solve the particular puzzle. Next, when we turn on the escape rooms, they use a key to turn them on. I always retain the key. That way students can't turn them off and on and reset their time. Because, believe it or not, some students have worked it out really, really quickly. And so we always retain the keys, and that way they're locked into doing the escape room and trying to work through their way through solving those puzzles, and they can't reset it. I often provide paper for students, or get them to write on the paper itself, because that helps them reason things out rather than just trying to keep everything in their head. It also helps them explain things to each other and communicate some of that knowledge a bit better as well. I've also talked about making sure that theme connects well with the puzzles, and reading that theme with expression to the students, or showing them the video at the start to make sure they all get the same onboarding experience to these particular puzzles. Now, we only let the students work at one puzzle at a time, one envelope at a time. And the other thing I always remind students is make sure you get everything out of that envelope. Some bits of paper can be a bit sticky and can get stuck in the envelope. Make sure they get everything out, because it's hard to solve the puzzles if you don't have anything. Now, we've had thousands of students complete our various escape rooms over the last few years, and the feedback has been phenomenal. People have really enjoyed them. People have really gained a lot out of them. People have really been challenged in their thinking and their understanding by doing these escape room puzzles and learning off each other as they do them. Typically, we do them like an open book sort of activity, so they can use whatever resources that are before them, their textbooks and things like that. So it's not just all about memory work, it's about problem solving work and nutting things out and doing that understanding work. Students have also been commenting that they love these activities. They're really fun, they're engaging, they want more of them within their classroom, which is not normally the case with your average run-of-the-mill classroom with a bunch of problems you need to solve. They tend to be a little less engaging. And one thing that we didn't expect to happen is students wanted this to become an assessed activity. And so we actually use these in some classrooms as a form of basic assessment, fairly low value assessment, like a 5% sort of piece of assessment. Students have been talking about how motivated they are. They really want to solve these puzzles and get through this escape room and get to the end of it and solve whatever's here. And this has been consistent feedback over quite a few years, that students have really enjoyed it and wanted to actually solve it and complete these things. Now, one thing to consider is, if you're a researcher, the research in escape rooms, educational escape rooms, has been taking off over recent years. And this trajectory keeps on going up. More and more escape rooms are being used in more and more diverse subjects, everything from history and geography to engineering and nursing and dentistry, a whole bunch of different areas. And they're they've been found to really engage students in those different areas and get them thinking hard and long and deeply about their different subject material. I've got a whole bunch of my recent research here, papers across a whole bunch of different disciplines, mostly around the STEM sort of areas, and that gives you a start of how you can publish papers in this area and also develop puzzles in each of these areas, because within these papers I normally share the different puzzles that I've used and how students have responded to those different puzzles. That leaves us to where to from here. Well, if you want to collaborate with me in designing escape rooms, maybe for your own classroom or other classrooms, or maybe you've got a business that you want to use escape rooms as a professional development sort of activity and a team building activity and things like that, please get in touch with me there. My email's there. So you might want to develop some escape rooms based on this. You might want to get your hands on some of those escape room decoder boxes. You can go to the website there, escaperoomeducation.com, where all those escape room boxes are available with complete instructions of how to use them and program them and everything like that. You don't need to be a programmer. It's all set up and super simple. You just put in the answers and away it goes. You might also want me to do some training for your team to actually mentor you in developing puzzles. At first, it took me a long time to develop puzzles. It was quite a slow process. But once I got the hang of it and developed dozens and dozens and dozens of puzzles, it became a whole lot faster to latch on and say, okay, I can develop a puzzle that does this, 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 and it's quite fast and quick in comparison to starting off with no background in it and having to do it the hard way. Well, that's all for now. Hopefully escape rooms are coming to a classroom near you and your students won't be puzzled, but learning will be inescapable for them.